case. 3, 2, 1. Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about food waste at colleges and how we can try and reduce it. So really, we're going to go into some stories from JCCC as well as from K-State. We're going to discuss some tools. And so here is the agenda that we'll be going over. So first, introductions and pre-session poll, presentations on why food waste is important, as well as what's going on at JCCC and at K-State, and then ending up going to frameworks and tools on how to reduce food waste at universities and colleges. And we'll end out with Q&A. We'll be able to ask your questions, and then with a post-session poll. So with that said, because we've got a little bit of a small group here, let's go ahead and do some introductions. So I'll go ahead and start. And my name is Jacob Larson. I work here at K-State Pollution Prevention Institute. Been here for about a year now, really focusing down on food waste. And so this will be my first webinar I'm hosting. So Crystal, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Crystal Antone. I'm the Zero Waste Coordinator at Johnson County Community College.
Thank you. And Kristi?
I am Kristi Baonga. I'm a registered dietitian at K-State in Housing and Dining Services, and I'm the Menu Management and Support Services Administrator.
Thank you. Nancy?
Good morning, Nancy Larson, K-State Pollution Prevention Institute. I'm the director and Jacob's assistant today. No relation to Jacob Larson.
Thank you for the help, by the way. Megan.
Hi, I am Crystal, Zero Waste Associate at Johnson County Community College.
Thanks for joining. And then Lori. Your mic might not work, but if you do want to introduce yourself, you can go ahead and enter that through the chat. If not, it's all good, no worries. So we are running a little bit small today, so it's a little bit more informal, but because we are recording it and we want to share it out, we're going to go ahead and keep on going through this. Now, it might be a little bit quick, but with the small attendee pool. Oh, no worries on the mic issue there, Lori, no worries. It happens to the best of us. So with that said, let's go on ahead and get started with a pre-session poll. And so this is just a quick question on your knowledge on food waste. Okay, thank you guys for answering that poll. Looks like we've got a decent number of people who are pretty confident on food waste that know a lot about it. So there are the numbers right there. So we'll go ahead and stop sharing that and head back to the actual presentation. Okay, so starting off, we're going to go ahead and talk about why food waste is really important. And so that will in fact be me. So setting the stage. Why is it important? And so to really get into, why food waste is important, it's important to understand what the definitions are, what the terminology is, what is edible food waste versus what is not edible food waste. So for instance, chewed gum, would you consider gum to be edible or inedible? The FDA happens to say it is actually edible, it is food. Fish sticks, if you're to classify your waste, would you say that fish sticks are frozen food, or would you say that they are fish product? Right? There are some differences there. And so EPA says they're fish, but REFED says that they're actually frozen food. So you can see some differences in categories there. And you can really see this in the terminology that's used on a lot of food. Right? So you've got food waste, you got surplus food, food loss and waste, consumption, food loss, and all of these different organizations have different terms. And I'm not showing this to get too pedantic or anything along those lines, but more just to express that there are these differences. Different organizations have different ways of defining their waste. And so throughout the rest of this presentation, you'll see a number of facts and figures that say, X amount of food waste is generated here, there, and over there. And it's just important to understand and know that there are some of these small differences in terminology. And what with you guys being pretty comfortable with food waste, I'm sure you will see a number of things you've seen before, so it'll be a bit of a review here. But moving on, when I'm talking about food waste, I'm typically referring to the colloquial understanding of food loss as well as food waste. And that you can see right down there below. Okay, so regardless of these definitions, we generate quite a bit of waste. So USDA and EPA, 30 to 40% of US food is wasted, and that's quite a bit. You can see there's some numbers, 161 to 335 billion pounds a year, pretty big. 2 pounds per person per day, pretty major. And there's a figure that I've seen a number of times, and that's that we generate enough waste to fill the Rose Bowl Stadium every single day out of the year with just food waste, which is pretty major. So to bring it a little bit more personal, if you're going to a grocery store, you have 2 sacks of groceries, imagine you just drop one on the floor, oh dear, right? It's just waste. So where does that actually go? Well, of non-industrial food waste, nearly half of it goes to landfills. And then once that waste is at the landfill, you end up finding that that's the most common item at the landfills, constituting about a quarter of that solid waste. And then if you look at the other pathways that food waste can go, such as going to hungry people or hungry animals, going to industry, you see those different pathways don't really make up much of a percentage there. So what is the impact of all of this waste? It's important, what resources are being used right now for food and for agriculture? And you can see here, 16% of US energy is put into food and agriculture, 50% of US land in agriculture, and about 2/3 of freshwater in agriculture. And considering that there's 30 to 40% of food waste, you can see that there are some issues that can happen here. And so this little chart here is from the EPA's From Farm to Kitchen report, and it details out, the specifics, the specific metrics on the specific impacts on land, on water, on fertilizer, on energy, and greenhouse gas emissions. So for instance here, the amount of land that is in essence wasted is the size of California and New York combined. That leads to habitat loss. You've got issues with water from drought, fertilizers, enough fertilizer to grow a year's supply of plant-based foods for domestic consumption, which was really interesting when I saw that. So there is some issue, there's some impact. And just a quick note on water. I'm just gonna leave this slide up a little bit so you can see it. It's really interesting how much water really goes into the things that we consume. Now, with that said, environment, we also have our communities. And the amount of surplus food calories, there's enough calories in surplus food that can feed all food insecure Americans day after day after day. And what with that said, we've got some issues here in Kansas. Just under, well, actually technically 9.7% of Kansans are food insecure. And then when it comes to kids, that's about 14%. So we've got some food waste. We've got some people who are hungry as well. And that, in addition to the environmental and the social, we also have the economic impacts where we were wasting more than $161 billion. And trying to reduce that has benefits that you can see on the far right over there. Now, that said, that's also for the UK, but it might be applicable here as well. So moving on forward, how is this relevant to us? Well, we do have a goal. The United States has a goal to cut 50%. Cut food waste by 50% by 2030, compared to some baselines from EPA and from USDA. And it involves everybody here specifically because, well, colleges have food service. And now with that said, the food service is a little bit of a small slice here, but indirectly, students make up some of the residential side of things, and students might live at home or they might live in group settings and can share that information. And so trying to reduce food waste and educate consumers at colleges can ultimately lead to quite a few, well, can lead to some widespread impacts on that. So that is the importance of food waste right there. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing. It looks like we are actually right on time. Okay. Okay, so Crystal, are you ready? Ooh, you're currently muted.
Okay. You ready for this?
I believe we are. Feeling ready?
Okay. Oop. I don't think I can start my video.
That's okay.
I'll start it after I'm done. Because the camera blocks my screen, so I can't see what I'm doing.
No worries, no worries.
Okay.
We'll have the final Q&A at the end, and so.
Yes, I'll come back on then.
Okay.
As I said before, I'm Crystal Antone. I'm the Zero Waste Coordinator at Johnson County Community College. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing to reduce food waste, our composting system, and then since our waste audit with K-State, other things that we're trying to implement after realizing how much we have. So there we go. One of the things that we have done, so this is sort of our new motto, is reducing waste and feeding people. So that's our goal for the near future, is to work on food waste on campus and to feed people who need those calories that you were talking about that go to waste. This is expired food from our campus food pantry. This has become an Earth Week event, and we open it all up and then compost it. It's a lot of work, so that's why we make it an event, so students can get involved with that. But it helps them realize both that we have a food pantry and how much food even there goes to waste because of expiration dates and other things, and green beans. So. And these are all the different locations that we have on campus that produce food waste. And we do have those food service things, but we also have a farm. And then we have a culinary training center, which produces a lot of food waste. And we have a childcare center. And then most colleges have some sort of catering and event center. And we also have a performing arts center. One of the things that did happen during COVID is that we closed our museum cafe, and it is not going to reopen. So we have a few less locations to produce food. And then our campus farm teaches students about market farming, and they sell produce at the OP Farmers Market, Overland Park Farmers Market, sorry. And they have donated some food to the student food pantry. So we're trying to make those connections between people that need food and all the places we're producing food. And the two ways that we are helping to feed students is our Student Basic Needs Center, where we do stock food and students can take things that they need, also personal hygiene items, diapers, pet food, stuff like that. And then we have the Cavalier Meal Share, where they sign up when they do their financial aid, and if they qualify, well, more people qualify than actually get it because we don't have enough funding. But if they do get it, they get a $7.50 a day that's on their ID card that they can use at any dining location or vending on campus. And they get that every day of the week, including the weekends. And then, well, this is our composting program. Well, it was our composting program. Our former steel vessel was 11 years old. We've composted over 8,000 pounds of food waste and 400,000 pounds of wood waste, both from our landscaping, and then we work with a local cabinetry shop to get sawdust that we use to amend our compost and control the moisture. And then our wood chips add aeration to the compost as it's going through the vessel by creating pockets. This vessel that you see there was 5 feet in diameter and 12 feet long. And depending on how much we were putting in there, it takes 4 to 7 days to go through that vessel. And when it comes out, you can see it looks like what is being dumped there. So it's mostly broken down. We still have like whole potatoes and pineapple tops and stuff like that. And we put it into static piles, well, aerated piles that sit and cook. And then when they're done and mature, we take them out to our campus farm. Currently, because unfortunately our vessel had a bit of a catastrophic rusting failure and the structural integrity was in question, we did shut our vessel down. We are currently using food cycle. It's very easy, but the students aren't learning quite as much as they were before when they had to actually compost and amend and take temperatures and stuff like that. So we will be replacing that composter once our next budget cycle is in place, which is in July. So we are hoping to have a new composter online by August or late July. We're getting a little bit different system. It's 22 feet long, so about twice as long as what we had. It has a screener to deal with contamination. And hopefully by having a longer vessel, we won't have to use the mixer first. And that will be long enough to mix everything on its way through the vessel as it's turning. Right now, we have been using a mixer and mixing everything together with the sawdust and the wood chips, and then we put it in an auger and auger it up into the vessel. So this new vessel just has a hopper. We're hoping we can just pull up and dump directly into it. And then I'll talk about our campus farm. Our sustainable agriculture program, you can see it's placed there between some soccer fields and a warehouse and a residential area and a busy street. So it's about 3.5 acres. They're teaching market farming so that students who want to start their own farm can make a living. They sell at the Overland Park Farmers Market, which I mentioned, and the Rolling Prairie CSA. They have U-Pick events, and they have worked with After the Harvest to glean feed, mostly during COVID because they were growing food and then didn't have an outlet with which to sell it or distribute it. And so they were donating that. And they have brought produce to the campus food pantry when they have excesses. And luckily they had a very good sweet potato harvest this year. So right before Thanksgiving, they were selling 10-pound bags of potatoes for very cheap. So that was a great Thanksgiving thing that everybody got to participate in here on campus if they wanted to. So because we do our own composting and we pick up all the food, we get to see a lot of what comes through, and we try to notice any patterns so that we can sort of head off the food waste when it's happening. So you can see here are some of the issues that we've had. A lot of dough that goes out and was never made into pizzas. A lot of pizzas that were made and never went out to people. A whole bunch of Chinese food, and our salad bar, which has quite a bit of waste on it in that photo. So when we notice that there's patterns, and when we are, since the waste audit, we have continued to write down like what we are seeing from each location as far as what the food that's coming in and making notes on that. So we are starting to develop, patterns or see what is coming out on a regular basis so we can notice those patterns. And then when we do, we talk to the head of the food court or the head chef and we say, listen, we've noticed these things are happening. Can you work with your staff to maybe not make so many pizzas right at the end of their shift or before the food court closes down, or not make so much dough so that we end up with pounds and pounds of dough at the end of the week. And one of the things that we did notice too before COVID was, for years and years and years, our composting pickup was around 450 pounds of food a day. And then about 18 months or so before COVID happened, before 2020, those numbers started to ramp up. And there were days, a lot of days, we were doing 750 pounds to 1,000 pounds of food. And we were planning on doing a waste audit in 2020 to figure out, like, were we having more like cooperation in composting food throughout the campus, or were we wasting more food, or just preparing more food across like through events and that kind of thing. And we did have a lot of events that were going on in our event center that year as well, a lot of large events. So unfortunately, then 2020 happened. We never got the waste audit done. And now we do about 250 to 350 pounds a day. And that difference is mostly events. So the food court and the culinary center produce a pretty steady 250 pounds a day. And then depending on events, we get an extra 100 pounds or so. But it was a good time to do a waste audit. These are other things we've seen in composting. So these are items that come out of our culinary center that don't get used, and it's perfectly good produce. And they just didn't use it in the class for some reason. I guess it's been slightly worse post-COVID because a lot of students will still get sick and people don't come in when they're sick. So a lot of students will miss classes, and then a portion of the foods don't get used in the class as well. Or classes just get canceled if too many people get sick, and then all of the food doesn't get used. So we're working on getting these things up to the food pantry as well. They also end up with a lot of milk that they end up throwing out because it gets really close to the expiration date and they're not going to use it in a class before it expires. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to do now since the waste audit. And then this is one of the hardest things to see is all the wasted meat. I mean, protein is one of the biggest things that, you try to get back to people who are hungry. And those, poor fish was only half filleted and then got composted and none of it was eaten. And that's just a really bad waste of resources. So the culinary director of the culinary center has talked to us about setting up like a second class that focuses on preparing those leftover foods from other classes and then safe packaging and storage and then distribution of those foods. So that's something that we're working on to see if we can combat a lot of the food waste that's coming out of our culinary center. And then with your waste audits, then you find all the things you didn't know about, right? So all the sushi we figured out was going in the trash every day. I've estimated it based on what we found in the waste audit, and it's probably about 3,000 pounds a year of sushi that we're throwing away. But of course, the barrier to composting it is that it's already prepackaged and nobody wants to open all of them up. Whereas there is no barrier to getting it to the food pantry in their fridge and then redistributing it. Other than we need to make those connections and get the staffing and the system in place to make that happen every day. And these are the things we sort of expect to see when you do a waste audit. So these are food trimmings. And as Jacob talked about in the beginning, the different terms for food waste. So I call this food waste, and then I call what we were looking at in the slide from culinary where it's produce and stuff, that's wasted food. But I like some of that other terminology, so I think I'm going to change that when I'm talking about it to the staff here. And some of the other things we found that were not pretty is non-compliance issues. So all these things were found in the trash. There was pork from our butchering and knife skills classes, vegetables from those same types of classes, or they're just cutting up vegetables and then composting them. And then everything from our pastry program, apparently. And we got a new instructor in that class, so I guess he missed the memo. But he is now composting since we have done the waste audit and we're able to talk to the director. And then we have catering waste. So stuff like this happens where there's so many box lunches left over at the end of the event, buffet food that never was put out, that type of thing. So recently they have, since we have talked to catering after the waste audit, they have brought some excess box lunches up to the food pantry twice. They brought 30 each time, so that's a start. But again, getting those systems in place so that becomes commonplace and expected. So one of the bigger things we're working on right now is trying to get an SMS texting system in place so that we can let students know that there's food available and where food is located. So two of the things we're looking at is sort of a decentralized distribution system where the onus is kind of on the students. They would be texted the location and the time frame which the food is available. They'd have to bring their own containers, and then they would have to go to those locations. So in the event of like the culinary center, that's a whole difference that's, on campus but not connected to the main buildings. And catering also is disconnected from the main campus. So it's a little bit harder for students to get over there maybe on short notice. But this is one of the systems that we're looking at doing. And then the other one would be a centralized distribution system where all those different departments package that food up and transport it to the food pantry in a safe way to get into their coolers. And then they send out the messaging and all the food is in one location. So, and granted, our food pantry right now is not in a great location, but it is going to be moved by next year into one of the main corridors of the campus. So that should be much easier for students to get to the pantry to pick food up. So those are two of the things that we're working on now. We are having trouble getting permissions so far to use SMS texting. So we're not very far along in the system. We have a lot of agreements and good ideas, but we're sort of waiting on that portion to be approved through our IT folks. And that meeting is supposed to happen tomorrow. So wish us luck. And then I just wanted to throw this in there. Pumpkins are, it's not exactly food, but it's produce that's being thrown away. And so every November after Halloween, we do pumpkin composting, and we take food donations for that. And we actually get it's probably close to 200 pounds of food donations and 750 pumpkins that we get donated. And that's just for staff and faculty at this point. This next year, we are going to partner with Food Cycle and put a semi-public drop-off location in place. And we're hoping to do more around 4,000 pounds of pumpkins. And then who knows how many food donations for our pantry. So, and our food pantry does work with harvesters as well to help moderate, if they get too much stuff or they're missing stuff. Harvesters does fill in that gap and takes the excess or provides stuff where we don't have it. So that's a good partnership as well. And that's pretty much all I have to say on the subject at the moment.
Thank you for that presentation, Crystal. Appreciate that. Kristi, are you ready to present?
Yes, let me just get my screen shared with you all.
All right, we are able to see it.
Perfect.
Take it away when you are ready.
So as Jacob introduced, I am Kristi Baonga. I have been in my role as mini management administrator for almost a year now, but before that I've spent about 8 years as a culinary operations manager in our dining centers. So I've worked hand in hand with our cooks and our staff, our student staff, on some of these guidelines that I want to work through with you today. Just a little bit about K-State dining. We have 2 main operations for residential dining. So all the students living in the dorms, residence halls, they eat at Kramer Dining Center, which is the picture up at the top, outside and inside, and Derby Dining Center, with the bottom pictures there. Both have undergone renovations within the past 6 or 7 years. So they're really fancy looking right now. But we also have some retail operations, 2 restaurants that are on campus, cafes and convenience stores. But for the purpose of today's discussion on food waste, I just want to focus on our residential dining because it is an all you care to eat style facility. We have just under 3,000 meal plans this year. That's a little lower than normal, but that includes our students, our staff, and our faculty, and that equates to about 30,000 meals per week. So what I would like to talk about today is how we're trying to reduce that food waste before the food even gets to the plate, through our operations standard practices and our flow of food. So each of these bullet points here are just pieces of the puzzle for us in serving our students. But with each of those, there's opportunities to reduce waste. So I would like to kind of talk through each of those. The first being menu management, our menu writing, our recipe development. One of the main things that we do right now is Computrition, which is our menu management software. And that is the main part of my position, is controlling that software and the use in our dining centers. All of our managers have access to this, and it's how we organize all the food production that we do. So there are plenty of other menu management softwares out there, but this is what we use. I'd be happy to talk more about that with anyone that's interested. But the main purpose of this is for us to have standardized recipes. So having standardized recipes just means that we have tried, tested, evaluated recipes that we know work and that we know create the exact amount of food that we wish to produce. So using all of our procedures, all of the equipment that we have that's a high quantity equipment in these 2 dining operations, and having a list of ingredients, that's how we set up our system to be able to create these standardized recipes, and then we can scale them up and down for whatever quantity we want. So the pictures that I have here are just screenshots of the Computrition system that we use. But as you can see, there's recipes that are in a standard format, easy to read, and easy to follow for our staff. And so that makes our standards for quality and consistency a lot easier for us to manage in the kitchen. And we're lucky to have a lot of really talented staff, but taking the time to train every single new cook on these standards is really important for our standards. So what that means as far as food waste goes is that if we have that quality inconsistency, then that leads to less waste as far as customers or errors in recipes where we would have to dispose of an entire 100 servings or 500 servings of a product just because of a small error in the production process. So the other part that we use for our computation system is the forecasting, because we're able to collect data from our food production, then that is used to predict or estimate how much food we want to produce. So we have collected data from production staff and from our meal census, just keeping track every day of how many students are eating at breakfast, lunch, and dinner at both dining centers, as well as how many students are actually living in the halls, figuring out what those gaps look like, and then tracking how much food was not just produced, but how much was left over, and how we can adjust those meals for the next time. And that can keep us more accurate as we go throughout the year. Being in a college and university, you know, our customer base changes every year. So about 80% of our students are freshmen who may move on after the semester ends in May. And when we come back in August, it'll be a whole new set of students. So kind of taking time to track how students are eating different foods and getting the feedback from them, that helps us be as accurate as possible with how much to produce. And then the other piece of that is batch production. Cooking things straight to the line is not only like better for quality, it's fresh and customizable for students, but that also helps reduce how much we might waste at the end of a meal because we're only producing straight to the demand. So all of that just comes with teamwork and communication within our operations. Since we have the ability to have several different menu concepts within each dining center, it's set up so much like a food court where they have all of these options, and you know, anywhere from the walk stations with Chinese food to pizzas, grill, burgers, French fries, all those kinds of things. They can choose from any area. So it is difficult to predict what they're going to eat and where, but we do our best to keep track of that. So from that forecast, we're able to run reports within our computation menu management system to see what our menu needs are. So this purchasing from our forecast just helps us be as accurate as possible so that we're not over ordering and risking having more product that will go to waste just from lack of use. We try to utilize the thousands of ingredients that we do have in multiple dishes. So there's always other opportunities to use that before it would go to waste. But this also helps keep some control over that. And then of course, when you're purchasing and receiving that inventory, making sure that we have a really good system in place for us to store our food safely so that we don't have the risk of food sitting in a storage, like a cold storage container or refrigeration unit for too long and not getting rotated out to be used before newer product. Then we're able to reduce our waste in that manner as well. So as far as our food production methods go, again, talking about training with our staff is super important for us. We have systems in place in both of our all you care to eat centers for taking those standardized recipes and printing production reports, which are just, we call them ingredient tags in our operation, but they'll give us the exact yield and the amount of a product that we need for the recipe. So we have a veg prep area in each unit. Our staff is trained in there to get the most yield out of a product, like getting just the peel off of the onion so that we get as much weight as we can out of those onions. Just as one example, one of the tags that we have here is for baby carrots, and those are drawn out to the weight there. So we're able to weigh those out along with the dry ingredients in our ingredient room for seasonings, for flour, for oil. And our cooks are able to come to these central areas in our operation and get what they need for their recipes before they start preparing it. So this helps, one, reduce errors in recipes, because we have like one full-time person in each of those areas that are focused on accuracy of those preparation methods. And then also our staff that are cooking the products don't have to waste their time gathering all of those ingredients themselves. It minimizes those errors from them having to do all of that work for each recipe that they produce. And then they're able to produce more recipes throughout the day. So just having our professional staff, again, being responsible for ensuring that those menu items meet our standards and following this system all the way through, all of those things lead to us reducing waste. And then as far as our service style goes, we have a lot of different menu concepts that are open. Like I mentioned, we are an all you care to eat, and I love that we changed it from all you can eat. So that's a little more PC term, I guess, if you want to say that, of all you care to eat. So we try to encourage our students to take a small portion and come back for more, because once they enter the dining center, they can come back and go to any line that they would like to. So training our staff on some of those portions and how we can control that in the most friendly way possible as a customer service training. That's something that we have established. Even within those standardized recipes, we show what that portion should be, and we have utensils and tools within the service area that can help make that consistent. And students are always welcome to come back for seconds if they wish to do that. As far as the self-service areas that we have, like our salad bar, you're able to just walk up and grab whatever item you would like. We try to use, we try to be smart about what type of plating and utensils that we have available for those areas. Having smaller plates and smaller bowls just helps encourage that you eat what you take, and then you can always come back for more. When we get down to it, of course, we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be completely accurate with every single food item that we prepare. There's always going to be some kind of leftovers. So we have production meetings with our staff every single day, and we talk about what we're going to do with those leftovers. Are we going to reserve it, or are we going to repurpose it? So one of the pictures that is up at the top is sushi, which we aren't serving currently, but it is actually a chicken fajita sushi. So we got really creative there. It's not something we would do every day, but it actually was really good because it had a cilantro lime soy sauce, and the students loved it. And it was just a way for us to utilize some leftover sauce and chicken that we had prepared already. So getting creative with stuff like that is really important for us to repurpose those items when we know that they're safe and still meet our quality standard as far as being able to serve a good meal. So the bottom picture there is also our crepe station, where we had both chocolate and vanilla crepe batter that our students decided to do swirled crepes, and people loved it and ate more of it. So just a couple of those examples. Of course, some items like macaroni and cheese, they're going to eat no matter if it's leftover or not. So reserving some of those kind of items also helps us reduce the waste. We don't have to get rid of it when we know that it's safe to reserve. So one of the other programs for service that we have in place is on the go options. Right now we call it Anyline, Anytime. And this is just an opportunity for our students who have busy schedules to take their meal with them instead of eating in the dining center. And so right now we're using a paper box and some occasional paper products, paper cups, things like that. So later this year, we're going to start a pilot study with green boxes, which are just a reusable, washable clamshell type container for students to be able to take their food to go and then bring that box back for us to clean and reuse. So just something for future note for us. But that's basically what we do as far as before the food hits the plate or when the food hits the plate. And so Crystal did an amazing job of showing some of the composting and the food waste that they have at JCCC, and we have similar practices for that in our facility. So one of the things that we do first with food that was overproduced is we try to donate it. If it's something that's in our kitchen that we wouldn't necessarily reserve to students because it won't reheat with the right quality for our standards, then we're able to donate things like that to our campus food pantry, which is called Cat's Cupboard, or Flint Hills Bread Basket, which we've had a partnership with for many years. Both take donations anytime, and so we work with them as much as we can to provide some of those items. One of the other apps that's new out there sounds very similar to what you're doing at Johnson County. It's called Chow Match, and it's a food recovery app. I think it's all across the United States, but it's something that we've just started to look into implementing at K-State. And it's an app that just you're able to put whatever foods that are available for pickup, maybe leftover pizza or grilled cheese sandwiches, and you can put that out there on the app and it will match with someone locally who can come and pick up that food and take it to either a food pantry or to a specific person who has identified that they are in need. So that will also be something we're looking forward to working with a little bit more. We do compost our veg prep scraps and our food waste from that comes back to our dish room. The pictures that are here are examples of how our very complicated dish belt works. It's got a system that's called a pulper. So this is the belt that actually brings back any of the plates from the dining room. This is in our Craner Dining Center, but Derby has a very similar system. So the food scraps and any like compostable paper napkins or anything like that, they go through this chute where it is recycled water that goes through our pulper and extractor system. So as that food waste goes down through the chute, it goes through our pulper just to get broken down into small, manageable pieces, and it goes all the way back to our dock area where we have an extractor that takes all of that water and pushes it back into this system while spitting out the food waste that has been basically just pulped into a very small amount. So we then take that and add that to our compost with the other veg prep scraps or any waste that comes from the service lines. We use K-State's composting area, and we actually deliver our compost to their site on the student farms, and they're able to use that for the landscaping across campus. And I believe you're able to pick up compost from there for like personal gardening and things like that as well. We also use compactors for recycling and for landfill, so trying to reduce the bulk of that waste as much as possible before it goes out to the landfill is something that we do. We also recycle our oil by providing some of that to our biodiesel research group that's on campus. They come and pick up our used fryer oil once a week and use that for their research. And so with all those things, we definitely have room for improvement. We're trying to start tracking and getting more of that data so that we can make goals for the future. All of that really has to do with the partnerships that we've made on campus. Thankful that we've made this connection with Jacob at pollution prevention, sorry. And all the others that I've kind of mentioned throughout, Call Hall and Weber Hall are great resources for us on campus to purchase our food locally and our dairy. And so a few others that are outside of our community as well that we hope to use as benchmarking tools against other colleges or to get involved in research. And again, just always evaluating our systems and tracking that information and continuing to learn what could be our next step in reducing that food waste. And I believe that is, yes, that's the end of my PowerPoint.
That was really thorough. I appreciate that, Kristi. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and we will talk about a framework for reducing waste. Okay, there we go. Should have that up right there. All right, yeah. So, reducing food waste. Previous two presenters, thank you again, Crystal and Kristi, for going over what your institutions are doing. This is providing an idea if you're new to food waste on how you can reduce food waste at your institution. So where do you start, right? When I initially got into this, it was essentially slurping down a lot of information from an open fire hydrant, whereas rapidly Googling a bunch of terms like food waste, food loss, how to end food waste. And at some point though, I found just so many different resources that it got into a bit of an information overload. There's just a lot of information out there. Food waste is a very important topic. And so a number of different organizations, both small, major, global and regional, are trying to reduce this issue, solve food waste. And because there's so many different names in the game, there are so many different resources you can find, so much literature that you can read into. So right here is just a little word map of some of the solutions listed in REFED, and you can see how many there are. Which is listed off on the left here, a few agencies that provide a lot of assistance. And it's definitely not it's not an exclusive list of everybody available. So for instance, you've got EPA, FDA, USDA, they all have some resources on reducing food waste. You've got state agencies, both us as well as Oregon, California, Texas, all the different state agencies. And of course, you have local universities such as us, Pollution Prevention Institute, Research and Extension, universities in those other states as well, all sorts of different groups. And a little note here too is that REFED, which is a great resource, by the way, I'll talk a little bit about them here shortly. They actually have a list of solution providers, and they have more than 1,500. So you can see there's a lot of information out there. And so what I what I ended up doing was, after absorbing a lot of this different information, I kind of created a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster here. And it's a framework of what do you do, in essence. And so what do you do? Well, first, it's important to understand your situation, know your situation, know what options you have available, and then act on those options at a sustainable tempo. And perhaps most importantly is to repeat that process. And if you've ever gone into Lean Six Sigma or into any kind of process improvement classes, you'll notice this is pretty similar to Lean Six Sigma, as well as a plan, do, check cycle. It's because it's process improvement, and there's always this cycle that you need to go through. So know your situation. How do you do that? Well, this is really where you're trying to discover the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, the why of your food waste. And once again, digging through and trawling through a number of different resources, there are 3 specific actions that really come up. And that is examining your records, going to Gemba, and doing an audit. So these different actions, they have different impacts. Examining records, it's a little bit of a big overview. How much waste are you sending off each month, right? So you can track trends. Going to Gemba, that's actually a Six Sigma term where you're really going to the spot that action is occurring at. You're seeing the process, you're observing it, you're able to ask questions, you're understanding what the people that are acting in this process are doing. You get to know their roles. And then doing an audit, right? Doing a waste audit, very important if you want to get that granular information of the what waste is really being generated, what streams. Is it a lot of vegetable waste? Is it a lot of meat waste? And then understanding, when it's occurring and where it's occurring as well. So examine your records, go to Gemba, do an audit to really understand your situation. And by doing this, you get to develop an idea of your processes. You can identify what I'd mentioned, the what, when, where, and why of your waste. You can also identify opportunities for improvement as well as your barriers for improvement. So with that in mind, what about some options? So here are a few, here's a little bit of a list of common opportunities that I've seen specifically for universities. And tracking waste, it's a really big one. If you don't track your waste, try and actually do that. It really helps out with understanding your situation, and then you can start examining those records. Reducing portion sizes, that was mentioned in previous presentations. If you use trays, stop using trays, because that can also help with reducing portion sizes and overtaking of food. Switching to a pay by weight model if you're able to. That way there's more than of an onus on taking as much food as you can actually eat what you take, right? And then hosting sales at end of day products, establishing donation relationships, and educating students and staff. These are really common opportunities for higher education, but they're not, it's not the entire list. It's an infinite list, really. So where are some other locations you can go? What are some tools that you can go to gather some more options? Well, I've got 2 right here, and that is EPA. They've got a fantastic webpage, Sustainable Materials Management Tools, and it has some great toolkits in it. Model Recycling Toolkit, you can find how to handle a number of different materials, a number of different pathways, and it's something you can actually filter on through. The Social Marketing Toolkit, if you're trying to do consumer behavior, going through signages, how do you try and really get some impacts to, how do you really get that behavior to change? Contracts and procurement best practices, important, especially because a lot of universities, they do have contracts with, for instance, Sodexo or blanking on names, but, a lot of different food providers. There's a lot of subcontracts. Food waste reduction guides, which is actually the next slide. And then this one particular wizard that I just recently discovered this morning, that's the MWiz, and it's a repository of a lot of materials that EPA has sourced. And so there's a link that you can find all of that good information from, or if you just Google EPA, Sustainable Materials Management Tools, you'll find it. And over on the right here, we have the ASHI STARS reports. And this is something that is kind of an interesting little tool where you can see what other people are doing. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. So if you are a particular size of university and you're curious what other people of their same size are doing, you can take a look and find these reports if that university had actually completed it. But within here, the universities that complete these reports report on their activities for food and dining, groundskeeping, purchasing, a lot of different sectors, so to speak. So you can really see their activities that they are doing to implement sustainability in their operations. Really fascinating. And I've pulled out some cool ways to reduce food waste just by looking at some of these different reports. But on the next slide, this is the EPA food waste reduction guide for universities that I mentioned just a little bit ago. And so this is in that EPA Sustainable Materials Management Tools webpage. There are some great ways you can identify options through EPA as well as through ASHE. And with that said, you got to keep REFED in there as well. So REFED is also a fantastic repository of solutions. So over on the left here, they've got really fantastic tools for where food is being wasted, what you can do to reduce that waste specifically for your sector or your state, as well as the impact and the amount of money that's required, and then what policies your state happens to be under. So REFED, great provider for some of these options so you can identify them. And I do want to make a note here too on these terms here: prevention, rescue, and recycling. And I'm making this point because it's important to know what your best option truly is. And listed here is the EPA's food recovery hierarchy. And when you've got your options and you're looking through them and you're trying to decide, hey, what do I actually want to implement? Try and go for what's higher on this hierarchy. You really want to not have the waste in the first place, right? If you don't have the waste, you don't have to go through these other processes, and you don't have the environmental impacts, the social or the financial impacts of that waste. Just try not to have it. So sometimes that's not necessarily feasible though. So you really want to try and choose an option that actually makes sense and is in fact realistic, that people can really get behind you, that you can really get some buy-in. So once you have some of these options, you can, well, if you have a list of options, and with that said, you can go on ahead and try and chart out a pathway to reducing that waste to a goal. So now you actually have to implement it. You actually have to act at a sustainable tempo. And the reason I mentioned this is because it's important to not go too fast or too slow. Kind of in personal life, if you get into a hobby a little bit too hard, you burn yourself out. Or if you don't get engaging that hobby enough, you might get bored and not keep it. So similar thing if you're trying to make change at an organization. You have to go at a pace that is sustainable for your staff and for you as well. So here are some tips on making sure that change is sustainable. So make sure that it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, people aren't going to buy into it. Make sure that staff that are being affected understand the reason for that change. That, once again, helps establish that buy-in. And then make sure that the folks that are being affected feel heard about the change and supported in their roles when that change occurs. Really establish buy-in. Another really good point here is if you want to make that change sustained, you should try and make sure that the folks who are impacted see progress, that you can actually identify that things are happening, and that when things do happen, they are celebrated and recognized. So it's important. It's really important. Otherwise, if you go too fast, change might just fall apart. If you end up leaving a position and you'd established a great composting system or food waste reduction system and you leave, is there somebody there, or are there standards in place that will make sure that the next person that comes in is able to keep that rolling? Or is that change that you instituted, is that going to fall apart? So act at a good sustainable tempo. And it's everybody's situation is different, but it's important to keep on repeating that framework where you go back after making these changes so you can see if the changes are actually being used and implemented correctly, and if you actually met the goal that you have in mind for your waste reduction. Go on through to identifying options again. Are there new ones available? Are there ones that you had on your mind but didn't have the bandwidth to implement at the time? Reevaluate where you're at. And then, of course, act on it, making sure that you have that employee buy-in and you're able to sustain that change. And of course, just keep on going through that loop. So last minute resources here, mailing lists. There are changes that occur in waste management, and it's a changing field. And so here are just a few lists that you can look into, and so that you can stay up to date on changes. So in conclusion here, across the entire webinar, food waste has a massive impact on us, both environmentally, socially, and financially, and it can be reduced. So K-State, JCCC, so many different other organizations are acting on reducing food waste. And when you are new, it's important to go through a framework of continuous improvement to make sure that those changes last. And then just know that there are resources available that you can use if you need help. So that is the end of that presentation, and technically the end of all the different presentations there. So we are now going to the final QA section and then a post-session poll. So I'll stop sharing my screen here and open up the floor. Does anybody have questions? I do see a little question that was sent to me. So Crystal, so you're a new composter. Do you expect the volume to increase or decrease in the future? Volume of compost.
Sorry, I'm still having computer issues.
No worries.
I mean, I would hope the amount of compost shouldn't change based on the composter. It's just a way of handling it a little bit than we were before, but the amount of food waste on campus, I expect, will increase over time because we are still pretty post-COVID and our event center is not up to speed. They don't have nearly as many events as they used to. But we'll be able to offset some of that with these new ways of redistributing food back to people who need it. So I'm hoping it doesn't get, I'm hoping we don't end up with more than the 450 that we had for years and years and years. And I don't know what that climb was about. I wish we would have figured it out, but I'm expecting that that's probably where we'll end up again at some point. Once all the students are back, all the food is back, and all the events are back, so.
Gotcha. And then Chris, you talked a little bit about chow work, I believe it was, or chow match. And Crystal, do you think that particular application might be a fit for you? bringing that chow
I wrote
over.
it down to look up immediately after we close up here, so I'm looking into it right away.
Fantastic. Kristi, thank you for adding that to your presentation there.
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, we're still new to it as well, but if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, and then I see another question here. Do you happen to know, Kristi, how many pounds of compost you generate?
I was trying to look that up while we were talking. We haven't tracked for a while, and the way we tracked in the past was by they have a scale at the composting facility where you can drive your truck over the scale and see how much the buckets weigh on the back of the truck. So I feel like in the past it's been around 700 pounds, and that's once a week or sometimes twice a week. So it's somewhere around that. But again, one of our biggest things right now is just figuring out how to start tracking again. And then we'll be able to say, okay, let's try and reduce this, or how can we reduce this more? So
Yeah, those waste logs, they can be very helpful, very helpful. They
definitely.
do take time though, but change does take time as it stands. Do you happen to know how much, how your food court tries to prevent food waste? And do you think it's on the same scale as JCCC's food court?
Since ours is, I guess, Mike, what do you mean in the food court, like at our dining centers?
I believe the question is in reference to the post-consumer prevention, which I believe you touched based on.
Okay. So as our students, I think one of the, sorry if this isn't the answer that you're looking for. At the union. Okay. So that's not part of our housing and dining department, so I don't have actual statistics or anything from them. So I would be very interested in learning more about what they're doing. The only restaurant that's in the union that is part of our department is the JP's Union Station. So that's on our retail side, and I know they do practice the same kind of composting and things that we do, but I don't know honestly what they're doing to track that or try and reduce the waste that they have. So there's been a lot of changes in that union food court as far as the restaurants that are in there. At this point, I believe it's Chick-fil-A, Panda Express, and then we have again the JP's, and Call Hall has their own dairy bar there. So it's not as many options as it used to be, but I think probably some of those more chain restaurants have some of those things in place just for all of their locations. So
Gotcha. It sounds like some opportunities for partnership.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, and I believe the last message here that I'm seeing. So I see KU, representative from KU is here. If you feel comfortable, could you speak to what KU is doing on their food waste? And if you happen to be using, any comments on, could you comment on some of the signage that you might be using in your dining rooms?
So as I'm part of the all-you-can-eat location here at KU, we do a compost. All of our food waste goes into compost bags as well, and then obviously non-food waste we do a compactor for the landfill. I do not believe we go through more than probably, and this is a rough estimate, I don't have our statistics, I believe it's maybe a 60-gallon trash bag every day worth of food waste, which is not outrageous amounts. And that's in a 7-day period, probably a little more in the beginning of the week versus the end of the week because we are slower. And then we also recycle our oil for fryers, as well as during our down periods, donate to our campus cupboard, or the I can't think of which food location we have here in Lawrence, but we donate the stuff that we will not be able to use when we're closing down for the break period during that time period.
Gotcha. Mind if I follow up with another question on that?
Okay.
Also, welcome to the webinar. Notice you'd popped in. So when it comes to food donation, is there a particular how do you organize it, and how do you transport the food to the food pantry?
So we do it. We use FSS food tracking for our system here in AKU food service suite, and then we record the waste on, or a requisition for exactly what we're sending over there, and then they give us a poundage of what we're donating. So that's kind of, and then that goes into our waste requisitions as a donation and what we gave them, as well as we track any and all of our food waste through the same requisitions. If a product goes bad, if a product is unusable, it's all tracked at that point.
Nice. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Well, if there any other questions, keeping my eye on the chat in case there are. But if not, looks like we are nearing the time that this webinar is scheduled to end. It's a little bit early. But if not, I'll go on ahead and start this post-session poll. Christopher, I know you weren't necessarily here at the very beginning, but there was a pre-session poll. We'll go ahead and start that post-session poll right now. So if you guys could fill it out, it would be much appreciated. And of course, if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try and get some answered.
Does look like you're at 100% of participation, Jacob.
There's a final question there on the short answer. I was leaving it open in case anybody wanted to add some more thought to that last one. But yes, we are in fact at 100% participation. And so if you filled it out and you feel pretty comfortable, well, I appreciate you joining, and I hope you learned some really good information from this webinar that you'll be able to use at your facility. And well, with that said, this webinar is also recorded, and so we'll be able to send that out to people who are interested, and we'll have that on our YouTube page. And yeah, thank you for joining. Hope everybody has a fantastic, fantastic Wednesday. And